Hey everyone, it is Chris. This is episode 4 of my Magician Season 1 overview. You can find episodes 1, 2, and 3, which cover episodes 1 through 10, linked in the description. If this is your first time here, I take shows and movies based on books and compare and contrast them to the source material. Also, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of my future videos, and click the notification icon to join the notification squad, as it were, and be the first to know when something new drops. Warning, there may be spoilers ahead, since I discuss what happens in the TV show and compare it to the book, and sometimes that reveals things down the road or changes in the show that might actually spoil things for you in the future. So if you don't want to see that, now's the time to stop the video. I'm going to quickly go through each episode and highlight key moments and characters that are different in the show than the book. In this video, we're going to be covering episodes 11 through 13. It's the end of Season 1, folks. Let's get into it. Starting with episode 11, we're going to look at striking a deal. Yeah, this wasn't in the books either. There was never an argument and a vote like this. It was pretty much always, we need to kill the beast. That being said, I dug this moment in the show. The idea of doing a probability spell and seeing their futures was rad. One of the odd things that I found in the books was that they really didn't do a lot of interesting bigger magic in the first book. It would seem to me that if your whole life is bathed in magic, that you would be using magic to solve your problems, especially like this, a lot more. Next up, we have Penny and Joe. Since Joe wasn't in any of the books, this and the storyline with Penny and the Beast were additions for the show. It was really great, though. Any moment I can get that adds to Penny's character is great to me. It also served to elevate the stakes where it came to the Beast. Having him be a more active participant in the story in this way really made his character more interesting and more menacing. Next up, we have bottling your emotions. This was also new for the show and really great, as it was a way better explanation for the events between Margot, Eliot, and Q that happened later. It also gives us a plausible way for the fine guys and gals of Brakevilles to learn the skills they need to survive the coming conflict. It was also beautiful to see the divide between Penny and Alice and the rest of the Scooby Gang. In the novels, the battle magic that they learned was a mix of things that they found in books and a couple of spells that were created by Alice and Penny, since they were the two smartest kids in the group. This was a nice way of showing that in the show, since events have been accelerated so much. Oh, and the magic missile, quote unquote, that was created by Penny. Next up, we have Our Lady of the Underground. This wasn't in the novels either. The bits with the milk and coins happened, but in a different way, and there was never a vision of the lady to go along with it. I really dig how they changed this up for the show, giving them bits that lead them along towards their appointed moment with destiny. In the narrative of the novels, though, this moment that they are building to is one of the most important things to happen to any of the characters, and has lasting consequences that aren't fully understood until the very last chapters of the very last book. We still haven't seen the payoff of this in the show yet, but I am hoping that they don't let us down on this front. Next up, we have Q, Margot, and Eliot. While this moment was in the books, it was much, much different. It was a real not-a-hero moment for Quentin. In the novels, they are just drunk and stupid when it happens, and Q chooses to go after Margot. He makes the decision at a dinner party, for Pete's sake. It never really made any sense to me, other than a way to split up Quentin and Alice, and it was very contrived. In the show, you can maybe understand a bit what happened and why. A combination of drunkenness and the screwed up mental state that is left after the spell to bottle up your emotions led to a moment that none of them would have opted in for otherwise. What's really interesting to me is that this changes the dynamic of what happens next 180 degrees. The obvious fallout between Alice and Q is much more complicated, and where the ultimate blame for how things turn out has shifted greatly in the show as opposed to the novels. And I'm not sure I like it. What it says about Alice's character, her motivations, and her strength as a woman. but we'll talk about that in a bit. Episode 12, Meeting Our Lady's Emissary. This was different in the novels. They find a hermit, quote unquote, that they call the Saint, hiding alone in a cave in the hills in the novels, who gives them the information on how to call Our Lady. This was an interesting change to the story for many reasons. Julia wasn't involved in this part of the story. Another of the, let's just go with Coven, is the one to find the hermit saint. Since we've gone whole hog on the hero's journey angle with the show, I like that they are basically doing parallel journeys between Quentin and Julia. Julia had her own journey in the novels, but as I have said before, they filled us in with flashbacks since the main story was seen through the eyes of Quentin, Janet/Margot, and Eliot. Okay, next up we have Sexytimes Fallout. I love how Penny is the voice of reason here, trying to rally the troops after the night before. As I have mentioned earlier, Penny isn't really around much in the novels, and when he is, he's an ass and not very social. Penny is also actually likable as a character in the shows, where he was mostly a waste of space in the novels in my opinion. This is what I was talking about during episode 11. Alice in the novels is barely more than a child, so her sleeping with Penny as revenge, while trite and cliche, you could at least sort of believe. Pain for pain. Especially when you factor in that Quentin just got drunk and acted stupidly. When you contrast that with the show, it seems like a betrayal of her character. There were very, very real extenuating circumstances for Q's actions. Not that he shouldn't be held accountable, but it's different. And then having this version of Alice think it would be a good idea to immediately have sex with Penny as revenge, this is a bit much to accept for me. She always seems stronger and more mature than that, and this just feels like a destruction of the character she's built over the arc of this season. Next up, we have drugging Fogg. This one's really great and another addition to the story that, wasn't in the novels. It was a great way to give us more information about the greater story while being very cinematic, since on TV you show and in books you tell. They didn't really talk about the loops that much in the novels, the time loops, other than that they have them. And in the novels, the loops don't stop until they defeat the beast, at which point Jane destroys the watch on her own, which stops the time loops. Since, as I said before, Jane is still alive at the end of the story. Next up, we have The Lady's Visit. This was interesting, and not how it happened in the novels. Things weren't rainbows and unicorns after the summoning. It was more like hell on earth. But we'll get into that more a little later. Next up, we have time traveling. I really love this addition to the story. From the way the magic worked to how they followed Jane through to Fillory, it was well planned and executed and brought a lot of depth to the story. And the ending with the shot of Castle Whitespire in the background was really, really rad as well. And finally, for episode 12, we have Hey Josh. Josh living in the Netherlands. This was odd, but not completely horrible. As I mentioned, Josh is supposed to be a part of the Scooby Gang and not ahead of them at school. It was an interesting twist to his character, which, by the way, is completely different than what you find in the novels. And there will be more Josh to come, so that looks fun. All right, finally on to episode 13, the season finale. First, let's look at Fillory Further. I really love the idea of this, which was also new for the show. It was a clever way to structure the episode, ties into the overarching narrative of the Children of Earth writing stories about their adventures in Fillory, and sets an interesting pace for the episode itself. It was also really cool that our heroes, quote-unquote, discover that they were two of the characters from the books, which for a nerd like Quentin was probably the best day of his life. Next up, we have Ember. I really, really hated this part. Not only was Ember completely different from a design standpoint, I mean, he was an actual ram in the novels, not a half-man, half-goat ram thing. And he was not an idiot like he is in the show, and didn't give anyone his seed, for Pete's sake. While I wouldn't say I loved his character in the books, he had the gravity that one expected from a god, not basically just a foppish lush. And also, I mean, why on earth is everything in this show so centered around sex? It just... Next up, High King Eliot. Although he becomes High King in the books, the entire storyline with the marriage, being trapped there once he is married, all of that is new for the show. And in some ways, I really do dig the changes, and in other ways, they are kind of silly. In the novels, Eliot comes to love being High King and actually does a good job, after a bit of trying. Adding the character of Finn was really smart here and allows for some interesting moments coming up, especially around Eliot growing into his role as High King, because she is instrumental in making that happen. So, great addition. Next up, we have the Leo Blade. The Leo Blade existed in the novels as well, but wasn't created by the Scooby Gang for beast killing. It didn't show up until the last book, and I don't believe it had a name. It did have the same purpose, though. Namely, it could kill a master magician or even a god. In the novels, it is finally found by one of the survivors of the ritual to call Our Lady Underground to be used to kill Reynard the Fox for what he did to the other members of Free Trade Beowulf. Next up, speaking of Reynard, this was different than in the books, but the outcome was the same, namely Reynard killing everyone and then violating Julia. The major difference here was that Julia never had her memories altered, and she wasn't part of the Beast's attack party. In the novels, he is never seen again after this moment, which, as we will see very soon, was changed dramatically for the show, and I think for the better. And finally, we have Facing the Beast. This was completely different for the show, which I think actually played really well here. In the novels, they only face the Beast once, they don't have a magic blade, and no one is really the hero. The only thing that happened in these final moments that was also in the novel was the loss of Penny's hands, although that was a very different thing in the books. The Beast eats his hands instead of just cutting them off. But I think Martin's actions in the show fit way better with this version of the character, which I believe I have mentioned is far superior to the one in the novels. Okay, that's it, folks. That is it for Season 1 of The Magicians. We are done! Until Friday when the first review for Season 2 of The Magicians comes out. I'm just going to celebrate for a little bit of a job well done and accomplished. It was a great season, and as I said before, they've done a fantastic job translating the novels into the show and fixing a lot of problems that existed in the source material. So, again, bravo to everyone involved in bringing this show to life. Yeah, that's it. If you like this, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down so I can know if I'm doing all right or not. You have that power, my friends. And I will see you again on Wednesday with another Shannara unofficial Season 3 update. Until then, have a great one.